This week's video is sponsored by Squarespace. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Day 2 of my winter extravaganza. I live not too far from here in an area called Parksville. This is Nanuce, which is maybe a 15-minute drive from where I live. And there isn't an awful lot of snow where I live. The wind has picked up and it's pretty much blown everything away. So I thought I'd come down here just to check out the snow because I knew of a few sheltered areas, and luckily this area that I've been to a couple of times now is a little bit sheltered, so the snow is still on the trees and it looks absolutely beautiful. The wind has picked up a little bit, but the snow seems to be hanging in there. The one thing that I'm having a little bit of trouble with today is light, which seems to be an ongoing theme throughout my videos. It's very flat today, so whenever I find a nice shaped tree, the subject looks great, but the background is just looking too busy, so it looks a bit confusing. However, I have found this Arbutus here, and I think the background is far enough that it's not too distracting. Has a beautiful shape to it. So what I've decided to do is, because the limbs are kind of going out to the left and right, is put together a pano. At first I wanted to do a 65 by 29, but that just seemed too long, so I've gone down to 16 by 9, and that seems to be perfect for this subject. It's also trying to snow, so I'm hoping that it'll snow really hard and that'll get rid of the background even more. Alright, so this is the composition that I have, and I think it works quite well. The great thing about Arbutus trees, and I said this in last week's video, is the color really stands out nicely when it snows like this. And I will enhance the colors a little bit, just saturate them a little bit more than they actually are in reality. Just brings attention to them a little bit better, I think. But as you can see, 16 by 9, I think it works quite well. We have this great branch going out to the right, and then the one on the left there. Somewhat of a high key image. I might have to darken the snow at the bottom just a little bit, and then maybe brighten up the snow on the limbs of the tree. I also included this tree here on the right side because I like how it kind of bends back into the main subject here. So the theory is that it'll draw you back in to the area here, or the main tree. There is quite a bit of bright sky in the background, but I don't think it matters too much because it's a pretty much a white scene anyway. As far as contrast, I don't know, I might open up the shadows. I haven't decided yet. I guess I'll have to open it up in Photoshop to really decide what I want to do with this. But yeah, I think it'll work quite well. Now, if I go into the different modes here, I thought 65 by 24 would work, but I think that's just too wide. So yeah, we'll just stay with 16 by 9 for now. Anyway, that's the idea behind the image. Of course, it might not work out that way at all, but that's the theory behind it.
Well, not a bad start to the day. I think my choice of using the format 16 by 9 was a good one, because in the raw file here, 4 by 3, you can see that there's a lot of white space at the bottom and at the top that doesn't really add anything to the photograph. So I think the pano approach worked really well. As far as the background goes, it's a little bit busier than I had hoped. I was really hoping for a little bit more snow to come down to hide that background. So what I ended up doing in post-processing is using the dehaze slider, or in this case the haze slider, to add a bit more atmosphere in the background and soften the contrast. You'll notice that in the final result here, I have two versions. This version here, which is a little bit bluer, I kind of liked the blue ambient light and the contrasts with the orange in the tree bark. I also did another version here, which is a little bit more neutral in that I've taken the blue out of the snow and made it quite a bit just more of a neutral white color. I haven't really made up my mind which I prefer. Sometimes I like the bluer one, sometimes I like the more neutral one. But yeah, not a bad start to a snowy day.
Okay, so I'm just walking up the hill, Notch Hill here, and I actually haven't got that far because I found these great Gary oaks in a bit of an open meadow here. What I really love about this scene are the fallen limbs on the ground here with the grasses. So I'm using that as a foreground, and then we have this one Gary oak that has some really great branches sticking out each way. The only thing that I'm not sure about is the background. It's a little bit busy, but I think the trees are uniform enough that it won't be too distracting. I'm hopeful anyway. The branches themselves, they're really quite well defined because they have snow on them, so they're quite bright, and of course I can brighten them up in Photoshop. The background is a little bit darker as well, so I could probably darken that somewhat just to bring out the tree a little bit more from the background. But I'll show you the composition that I have, because I think the composition works really well. It's just the background that I'm not quite sure about. So this is the composition that I have. I just absolutely love the foreground here. It really, I think it adds to the whole composition. Just the deadfall, and it tells a bit of a story here. I had to get up quite high though, because otherwise the foreground merges with the trunk of the tree, and I don't really want that. I really wanted some separation between the two. The other thing that was a little bit bothersome was this snag back here. Originally I wanted to put the curve of that snag in the foreground between the main trunk and that snag there, but it didn't quite work. Looking too far over to the right, and there's a tree in the background that I didn't really want in there. But as you can see, I think the tree is prominent enough, and with the snow stands out enough from the background that we should be able to separate the two. But as you can see, the background, it's busy, but the trees are quite uniform, and they're away from each one another, if that makes sense. So I think this is going to work. There's enough foreground interest to keep it interesting, and then of course we have the main subject, the gnarly oak. So yeah, I think it's going to work. We'll see. And of course the light right now is not ideal. It's still a little flat, but there's not much I can do about that. Possibly it might work better as a black and white. I don't know. I'd have to try it out.
Well, I was a little bit disappointed with this photograph. It didn't turn out quite the way I had hoped. And there's two reasons. The first reason being is that the light is just too flat for this subject. the background blends in with the main subject, and it's very confusing to the eye. It's just too busy. And when I was standing there, it didn't look that bad, but as I look at the raw file, it just doesn't work for me. With a bit more directional light, perhaps on that oak tree, this might have worked. There might have been some more separation from the background. Now, again, in the final results here, I've cooled it down considerably, and I tried to use the dehaze slider again to soften that background, but it still looks very flat, especially the tree in the foreground. As I said, there's no directional light on it, so we have this even light, and it doesn't have a great three-dimensional feel to it. But I think the composition works. It just needs different light and perhaps something to soften the background just a little bit more. I'm not sure if that'll ever happen, but I'll be sure to check it out next time I visit this area. Have you been thinking about putting together a website to showcase your photography but lack the skills to put one together? Squarespace have taken all of the mystery out of constructing a beautiful website with their award-winning templates that will dazzle your audience. If you've been longing to have a simple, elegant, customizable website, then now's the time to go over to squarespace.com for a free trial. Enjoy the trial. Enter the code AdamGibbs for 10% off your first purchase. That's right. Enter the code AdamGibbs for 10% off your first purchase.
Wow, this is absolutely fantastic. It was quite unexpected. So not only do we have snow, but we have quite a bit of fog up here as well. So the conditions are really quite beautiful. The only issue right now is that the wind has really picked up, and things are moving around a lot. So that is causing a few problems with capturing moving leaves and stuff like that. I think I found a kind of a neat composition. It's quite busy, but I love the foreground and the background and all the elements in this scene. I'm just not sure if I'm including too much, but I'll show you what I have, because I think if it works out, it'll work out really well. All right, so this is the composition that I have. Just absolutely love this Arbutus that's in the foreground here with the reds set up against the snow, and it has a couple of branches coming off it that I've put in the corners here. Now I've had to go quite low because there's quite a messy branch in the background here, so I've kind of hidden it behind that. And what I absolutely love is the fog in the background with the conifers, and then I've kind of framed those with another branch at the top here. It is quite busy, but I think this is going to work. If it does work, it'll be really quite cool and a little bit different. As I said though, the hardest part is dealing with the wind. Luckily the snow is wet, so it's sticking to the trees quite well, but I don't know if it's going to last that long. I have it at a 30th of a second. I don't think that's going to be fast enough. So I'll take a few test shots, see if it's capturing the wind, and if not, then I'm going to have to bring the ISO up to 1600, because I also need the depth. I have this branch quite close in the foreground, and of course I want to try and get everything in sharp focus. Background doesn't matter so much, especially when the fog moves in, but the foreground definitely.
This final image I was really quite happy with because it was very complicated and I wasn't sure if it was going to work or not. But as I look at the final results here, I'm really quite happy with them. There are a couple of things that I did to this in post-processing. Again, I used the dehaze or the haze slider to soften up the background just a little bit. I also cooled down the photograph considerably because I love that cool feeling that we associate with cool colors. The snow underneath the snag in the foreground I darkened slightly so that the snow or the highlights of the snow lying on top of that snag would be more prominent. The only issue I have with this composition is that the snag going diagonally down to the right is a little bit soft. So obviously I didn't give it enough depth of field. I was stopped down to f16, so I suspect that I probably would have had to focus stack if I wanted everything in the frame in sharp focus. I also took a horizontal here, and again I used the same approach as the vertical. I darkened certain areas and lightened certain areas. I think in the horizontal version I didn't quite lighten up or give the image as much contrast as the vertical version, and I didn't cool it down as much. Both images work, but in all honesty I think I prefer the horizontal image. Once again, everybody, thank you ever so much for watching this week's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give me the old thumbs up. It's a great help. And as always, if you enjoy the content of my channel, be sure to consider hitting that subscriber button. Till next time, bye-bye.